In the later years of life, why does loss seem to settle deeper in the heart than it used to? Just sit with that for a moment. Don't rush to explain it. Don't try to solve it. Just let the question rest quietly, the way certain thoughts do when the day winds down, when the lights are dim, and there's finally nothing left to distract you. Maybe you're sitting in a chair you've had for years, a chair that has seen seasons of your life come and go. Maybe it's near a window. Maybe there's a soft lamp nearby. Maybe there's a familiar blanket folded over the armrest. And across the room, something feels different. Not in a way others would notice, not something you could easily point to, but something you feel almost immediately without trying. A presence that used to be there, and now isn't. It might be a voice you used to hear from the other room. It might be the sound of footsteps that once felt so ordinary you never paid attention to them. It might be a routine you shared, something as simple as sitting together in the evening, not even talking much, just being there. And now, that same space holds a different kind of quiet. Not empty, not completely still, but changed. The silence carries something now. It carries memory. It carries absence. It carries a kind of weight that's hard to describe, even to yourself. Because loss, it's not something new to you. You've experienced it before. You've said goodbye before. You've walked through moments that were difficult, moments that asked more of you than you expected. But something about this stage of life, something about these later years, makes it feel closer, more personal, more layered. Because now, when you lose someone, you're not just feeling their absence today, you're feeling the years, the conversations, the shared routines, the small moments that once felt ordinary, but now feel irreplaceable. You remember the way things used to be, without even trying. A certain look, a familiar phrase, a habit you used to smile at. And suddenly, those memories feel closer than ever, but the person themselves feels far away, and somewhere inside, that contrast stays with you. And maybe you've caught yourself asking this, even if only quietly. Why does it still hurt like this? Why does it come back when I thought I was doing okay? Why do some days feel lighter? And then, without warning, it all feels heavy again. Why do certain memories feel so vivid, like they just happened, and yet so distant at the same time? If you've felt that, if you've sat in that space even for a moment, then you already understand something many people don't talk about. Grief doesn't move in a straight line. It doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't politely fade just because time has passed. It stays, not always loudly, but steadily, quietly, in its own way. And yet, even with that, there is something else, something gentle, but real. Because even though the loss feels heavier now, even though the silence feels deeper, there is still a way to carry it, not by pretending it's not there, not by pushing it aside, but by holding it in a different way. And that way, it doesn't begin with distraction. It doesn't begin with trying to stay busy. It begins somewhere quieter than that, somewhere more personal. It begins in a place you may have visited before, but maybe not like this. Let's slow this down a little, because what you're carrying, it's not something that should be rushed past. It deserves space. It deserves patience. It deserves to be felt without being judged or fixed too quickly. Maybe you spent decades with someone, 30 years, 40 years, maybe even more. A lifetime, really. And when you think about it, it wasn't just the big moments that mattered. It was the everyday life, the simple things, the way the morning started, the sound of coffee brewing, the quiet conversations that didn't need to be deep to be meaningful, just being there, together, moving through the house without thinking about it, knowing where everything was, knowing each other without needing to explain. And now, that rhythm is gone, not completely erased, but changed in a way that's impossible to ignore. You wake up, and something feels different before your feet even touch the floor. The house feels quieter. The air feels still. And sometimes, It's not the big moments that bring it back. It's the small ones. A cup that stays in the cabinet, a chair that doesn't get used anymore, a habit that no longer has a place in your day. And those little things, they stay with you. They don't demand attention, but they're there. Or maybe your story is different, and in some ways, even harder. Maybe you lost a child, and there are no easy words for that. No way to fully explain it. It's something that changes everything, quietly, deeply. And even if time has passed, even if you've learned how to keep going, there are still moments when it comes back. A memory, a date on the calendar, a song, a thought that appears without warning. And suddenly, everything slows down, not dramatically but deeply, because love doesn't stop. It doesn't fade just because someone is gone. It stays. It finds new ways to exist, even in absence. Or maybe you're a grandparent now. And you notice things during family gatherings. The holidays come around, and they feel different, still meaningful, still filled with love, but not the same. You look around the table, and there's a space that isn't filled, a presence that isn't there. And even in the middle of conversation, or laughter, there's a quiet awareness that never fully leaves, a sense that something is missing. And then there are those evenings, when the day is over, when the house settles, and you find yourself alone in a way you weren't before, after years of shared life, years of presence. Now the evenings stretch a little longer, the mornings begin a little quieter, and the silence, it becomes something you learn to live with, not something you can fix, not something you can outrun, but something you slowly, carefully learn to sit with. And that's not easy. Because it's not just the loss itself, it's the space that loss creates, the routines that changed, the conversations that no longer happen, the presence that once made even the simplest moments feel full. And if any part of this feels familiar to you, even just a small part, then I want you to hear this clearly. You are not alone in this. Not in your thoughts, not in your feelings, not in those quiet moments that don't always get spoken out loud. Because grief, especially in these later years, is something many people carry quietly. Not because they want to hide it, but because it's hard to explain, hard to put into words. And yet, it's real. And it matters. There's something deeper going on beneath all of this. Something that people don't always say out loud, but they feel it. Grief feels heavier in the later years, not because you've become weaker, but because your life has become fuller. You've lived through more seasons. You've built relationships that weren't just casual or temporary, but steady, long-lasting, woven into your everyday life. You didn't just know this person. You shared life with them. Years of ordinary mornings, small routines that didn't seem important at the time. But now, when you look back, you realize they were everything. And that's what makes the loss feel different now. It's not just about one moment, it's about a whole lifetime of moments. When you're younger, life moves quickly. There's always something to do. Responsibilities pull your attention in different directions. You don't always have time to sit with your thoughts for very long. But now, things are quieter. The pace has changed. There are more spaces in the day, more pauses, more moments where your mind naturally drifts back. And when it does, it doesn't just remember. It feels. You remember the sound of their voice, the way they moved through the house, the small habits that once felt so ordinary and now feel irreplaceable. And sometimes those memories come gently. Other times, they come with a kind of ache that catches you off guard. You might be doing something simple, washing dishes, folding clothes, sitting by the window, and suddenly a memory appears, clear, close, almost like it just happened. And in that moment, the absence feels real again, not distant, not in the past, right here, right now. And that's when the questions start to rise. Why does it still feel this strong? Why hasn't it faded the way I thought it would? Why does it come back, even on days when I thought I was doing okay? But maybe the question itself needs to change. Maybe it's not about why the feeling is still there. Maybe it's about understanding what that feeling actually is. Because grief is not something broken inside you. It's not something that needs to be fixed. It's love that still has a place in your heart. It's the continuation of a bond that didn't end, even though the physical presence did. That's why it stays. That's why it shows up in quiet moments. That's why it doesn't follow a straight path or a predictable timeline. Because love doesn't follow a schedule. And when you begin to see it that way, something shifts. Not completely, not all at once, but gently. Instead of asking, "Why is this still here?" you begin to understand, of course it's still here, because the love was real. And real love doesn't just disappear, it changes. It settles into memory. It lives in the way you remember, in the way you speak their name, in the way certain moments still carry their presence. So the question becomes, not how to get rid of the grief, but how to carry it in a way that doesn't weigh you down every single day. And that's where a new path begins. So what do you do when those memories come? When the emotions rise quietly, especially at the end of the day? When the house is still and your thoughts have nowhere else to go? Most people try to push it away. They distract themselves, turn on the television, scroll through their phone, keep busy, even when they're tired, and that works for a little while. But eventually, the feeling returns, because it hasn't been released, it's just been delayed. So here's a different approach, a gentler one. Instead of pushing the feeling away, what if you allowed it to come, and then brought it somewhere safe? What if you brought it into prayer? Not in a formal way, not with perfect words, just as you are. You don't need to sit a certain way. You don't need to say anything complicated. You just need a quiet moment and a willing heart. Maybe you sit at the edge of your bed, or in that chair you've had for years. Maybe the light is low. Maybe the room is silent except for the soft sounds of the night. And in that moment, you let yourself remember. You don't rush it. You don't stop it. You let one memory come, just one. And instead of holding it inside, you speak. God, I miss them. Sometimes more than I expected to. There are moments I don't know what to do with this feeling, but I don't want to carry it alone anymore. So I'm placing it in your hands. That's enough. It doesn't need to be longer. It doesn't need to be perfect. Because prayer is not about performance. It's about honesty. And something begins to happen when you do this consistently. Not overnight, not in a dramatic way, but slowly, quietly, steadily. The weight begins to shift. The memories don't disappear, but they feel different, less sharp, less overwhelming, more like something you can sit with instead of something that overtakes you. And over time, you start to notice something. The same silence that once felt heavy begins to feel calmer. The same room that once felt empty begins to feel peaceful. Not because everything is fixed, but because you're no longer holding it all inside by yourself. Part 5. Case Study. Story-based illustration. There was a woman named Eleanor. She was in her late 60s. She had been married for over 40 years, a long marriage, filled with the kind of quiet, steady love that doesn't always get noticed, but means everything. When her husband passed away, the change in her home was immediate, not loud. Not dramatic, but deeply noticeable. The house was the same, the furniture was the same, the routines were still there, at least on the surface. But something was different. The mornings felt longer, the evenings felt quieter. There were moments when she would turn slightly, almost expecting to say something, and then remember. And that realization, even though it wasn't new, still carried weight. At first, she tried to stay busy. She kept the television on. She filled her days with small tasks. She visited family when she could. But at night, it all came back. She would sit in the living room, sometimes holding an old photograph, sometimes just staring ahead. And there was a question she couldn't quite answer. What do I do with all of this? One evening, she didn't try to distract herself. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't move to another room. She just sat there, quietly. And she spoke. Not out loud at first, just softly. God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to live in this space, the way it is now. I miss him more than I can explain, and I don't know what to do with that. That was the beginning. Not a solution, not a sudden change, just a beginning. The next night, she did the same thing, and the night after that. Sometimes she spoke about memories. Sometimes she just sat quietly. Sometimes there were tears. Sometimes there was only silence. But over time, something began to shift. The pain didn't disappear, but it softened. Memories didn't feel like something to avoid anymore. They became something she could hold without feeling overwhelmed. And the house, slowly, began to feel like home again. Different, yes, but not empty. She wasn't moving on. She wasn't leaving the past behind. She was learning how to carry it in a new way, and that made all the difference. Even with that kind of shift, there are still deeper layers to face, because grief is not just about missing someone, it's also about what comes after, the quiet moments, the empty spaces in conversation, the absence of daily companionship. And sometimes, it's not just being alone, it's feeling alone. There's a difference. You can be surrounded by people and still feel that something important is missing. You can sit at a family gathering, hear laughter, see familiar faces, and still notice the one person who isn't there. And that awareness doesn't go away easily. It shows up in small ways, in pauses, in glances, in moments when your heart remembers before your mind does. And then there's something else, the desire to stay strong for others. You don't want to burden your children. You don't want to bring sadness into conversations. So you hold it in. You smile. You say you're okay. And in many ways, you are okay. But there are parts of your heart that are still processing, still adjusting, still learning, and holding that balance between strength and honesty can be tiring, quietly tiring. But here's something worth remembering. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean the memories fade away. It means those memories begin to take on a different feeling. Less pain, more warmth, less heaviness, more meaning. And that doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, through moments of honesty, through small prayers, through allowing yourself to feel without rushing the process. There's a verse that many people have heard, but it becomes different when you truly need it. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Think about that slowly, not as a distant idea, but as something personal. God is not far from your grief. He's not waiting for you to get over it. He's not expecting you to move on quickly. He is close, right there, in the quiet room, right there, in the moments when memories come back, right there, when you don't even have words. And sometimes, that's enough. Not answers, not explanations, just presence. Because when you know you're not alone, even in your deepest feelings, something begins to settle. Your breathing slows, your thoughts soften, your heart begins to rest. And that's what prayer opens the door to. Not escape, not avoidance, but connection. A quiet, steady awareness that you are held, even in your grief. Part 8. Conclusion. Call to action. So as we come to the end of this moment together, let's return to where we started. Why does loss feel heavier now? Because your love has grown deeper over the years. Because your life has been full and meaningful and real. And that kind of love doesn't just disappear. But here's the part that matters most. You don't have to carry it by yourself. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not in the quiet moments when it feels strongest. So tonight, before you rest, take a moment. Think of the person you miss. Say their name, even if only in your heart, and bring that into a simple prayer. Nothing complicated, just something real. And if you feel comfortable, you can write their name in the comments, not as a performance, not for attention, but as a quiet act of remembrance. And if this message spoke to you, share it with someone else who may be walking through the same kind of silence, because many people are, more than you might realize. And they don't have to carry it alone either. And hold on to this. In the later years of life, love doesn't fade away. It doesn't disappear with time. It simply finds a new way to remain. A quieter way, a deeper way, a way that stays with you, gently, faithfully, always. And now, as this moment comes to a close, I want you to stay here just a little longer. Don't rush away yet. Let everything you've heard settle gently. Because this isn't just another message you listen to and move on from. This is something you carry with you, into the quiet of your evening, into the stillness of your home, into the moments when your thoughts begin to slow down again. So take a breath, a slow, steady breath, and think, just for a moment, of the person you've been missing. Not in a painful way, not in a way that overwhelms you. Just gently. Let their name come to your mind. Let one memory rise. Maybe it's something simple. A conversation you had many times. A way they used to smile. The sound of their voice in an ordinary moment. And as that memory comes, don't push it away. Don't try to control it. Just let it be there. Because that memory is not something you need to hide from. It's something that belongs to you. It's part of the love you shared. And that love is still here, just in a different form. And right here, in this quiet moment, I want to invite you to do something simple, not complicated, not something that requires effort or preparation, just something real. Speak to God, in your own way, in your own words, maybe quietly, maybe only in your thoughts, but honestly. You might say something like this: God, you know who I'm thinking about right now. You know how much they meant to me. You know the space they've left behind. And I don't always know how to carry this. Some days feel lighter, and some days feel heavier. But tonight, I don't want to carry it alone. So I place this memory, this love, this longing, into your hands. Stay with me in this. Give me peace, even if just a little at a time. That's enough. That's more than enough. Because prayer isn't about saying the perfect thing. It's about opening your heart, just as it is. And when you do that, something begins to change. Not everything at once. Not in a way that removes the past, but in a way that softens the present. You may still feel the absence. You may still have moments where the silence feels deep. But that silence won't feel empty in the same way. Because now, it holds something else too. It holds a quiet sense of being accompanied. A quiet awareness that you are not walking through this alone. And that matters more than you might realize. Because over time, that sense of presence, it becomes something steady. Something you can return to, again and again, especially at night, especially in those moments when the day is over, and your thoughts begin to gather. And as you continue to bring those moments into prayer, you'll begin to notice small changes, subtle ones, the kind that don't announce themselves loudly. But you feel them. You notice that certain memories don't sting as sharply. You notice that the quiet doesn't feel quite as heavy. You notice that you're able to sit a little longer, without needing to distract yourself. And that's how healing often works, not in big dramatic shifts, but in small, gentle steps, moments that slowly build into something steadier, something more peaceful. So tonight, let this be one of those moments. A small step, a quiet beginning, or maybe a quiet continuation And if you feel ready, there's one more thing you can do, something simple, but meaningful. You can write the name of the person you're remembering, just their name, not a long explanation, not a story, just their name. Because sometimes saying a name, even in a small way, keeps the connection alive in a gentle, respectful way. It becomes a quiet tribute, a way of saying they are still remembered, they are still loved. And if you know someone else, someone who may be going through a similar kind of loss, someone who doesn't always talk about it, but carries it quietly, you can share this message with them, not to fix anything, not to give advice, but simply to let them know they're not alone. Because many people are walking through this kind of silence more than we often realize, and sometimes the greatest comfort is simply knowing that someone understands. So as you prepare to rest tonight, let this be the last thing you hold on to, not the weight of loss, not the heaviness of absence, but the quiet truth that love remains. It remains in your memories. It remains in your heart. It remains in the way you still care, even now. And most of all, it remains in the presence of God, who holds both you and the one you miss. And if you need something to carry with you into sleep, something steady, something calming, hold on to this promise. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Not far away, not distant, close, right where you are, right in this moment, right in the quiet of tonight. So as you close your eyes, let that be enough. Let that closeness be enough. Let that presence be enough. And allow yourself, slowly, gently, to rest.